Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we'll talk about taking powers of powers. So we have here 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 3. What does that mean? Well, I look at the two exponents right next to each other separated by parentheses, and I get a little freaked out. But then I realize that just means that's 2 to the power of 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. So I'm going to show that in this tan color and this blue color, 2 to the power of 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. Well, what does that mean? Well, I know that 2 to the power of 2 is the same thing as 2 times 2. So I will multiply 2 by itself, total of, as I see here, 6 times. So I want to get rid of the parentheses because, as we said earlier, when we are multiplying this whole way through, we don't need these parentheses. So I notice here that's 2 multiplied by itself 6 times. I'm going to write that 6 times right there. And I'm going to write that this whole thing is 2 to the power of, you guessed it, it is 6. So I'm looking at how 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 3 became 2 to the power of 6. That also tells me that there might be a relationship between the 2, the 3, and the 6 here. That shows us a really important point that when we take powers of powers, we are simply multiplying. So I'm going to write that on the top. Powers of powers is equal to multiplying. So let's look at this example problem. We have Stephanie, who wrote 3 to the power of 2 to the power of 3 is equal to 3 to the power of 5. Is she correct? Well, if Stephanie were here, I'd probably tell her that she is almost perfect, as I usually tell her in class. Let's go into why. What does 3 to the power of 2 to the power of 3 mean? Well, that means that that's 3 to the power of 2 multiplied by itself 3 times. So I'm going to write that down right there. 3 to the power of 2 to the power of 3 is equal to 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 2, a total of 3 times. So that also tells me that when we look at 3 to the power of 2, that's just 3 times 3. So I'm going to write that again, but writing the whole thing out as it is to go under the hood to see what's really happening. When I count that up, I notice that 3's multiplied by itself is 6 times, which tells me that's 3 to the power of 6. Is she correct? Well, in that case, I'd probably say, no, Stephanie's not correct. But let's go into why she might have made that mistake. If you were paying attention to video 2, you know that when we have 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 3, we know that you can use the product rule to find that that's 3 to the power of 5. And I'm going to write that whole thing out to show you exactly what I mean. But that's a different situation to what we have here. We're not multiplying 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 3. Instead, we're taking a cube to the power of 3 of 3 to the power of 2. So we have to multiply 3 to the power of 2 by itself 3 times, which is why Stephanie is incorrect. Lastly, let's just check our work really quickly. We know that when we have 3 to the power of 2 to the power of 3, well, that's the same thing as 3 to the power of 6. That's what we're claiming. Just to check to make sure, 3 to the power of 2 is equal to 9. 9 to the power of 3 is equal to about 729. And then finally, 3 to the power of 6 is the same, 729. So we're good. Let's look at one last example problem. So we have 5 times 3 to the power of 2, and the whole thing is to the power of 3. What does that mean? Well, I noticed first that there's 2 separate numbers inside here. So I'm going to put the 5 in blue and the 3 to the power of 2 in this tan color. I first noticed that I am multiplying the parentheses, everything inside the parentheses 3 times. That's what the 3 as an exponent outside it means. Then I write 5, because I'm multiplying 5 3 times, and 3 to the power of 2, because I'm multiplying that 3 times as well. Well, after that, I realized that I am multiplying each and every one of these sets, 5 times 3 to the power of 2, 3 times. Then I will take 5 times 5 times 5, I'm going to rearrange it a little bit, get rid of the parentheses because we're multiplying, and do the 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 2 times 3 to the power of 2. I know from the product rule that I can combine them. So I get 5 to the power of 3 because I realize that there are 3 5s, And I realize that there's 3 sets of 3 to the power 2. So that in total is 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is 6. So that whole thing is equal to 5 to the power 3 times 3 to the power 6. I'm going to write that down on the top. So what does this example tell us? This example tells us one really important thing. It's that powers distribute. Distribute means that you are taking what's on the outside of the parentheses, and you're distributing it, you are giving it to each and everything inside the parentheses. Lastly, I'm going to check this really quickly. I know 5 times 3 to the power 2, that whole thing is equal to about 45. Then I realize that 45 to the power 3 is equal to about 91,125. Then I'm going to find 5 to the power 3, that whole thing is equal to 125. 3 to the power 6, that whole thing is equal to 729. I multiply the right side of the equation together, 125 times 729, to get the same exact answer, 91,125. So let's go over the vocabulary to close things out. So we can distribute. We learned that we can distribute the exponent on the outside of the parentheses. So that this term right here, that a on the outside, gets distributed to the m and the n separately. Finally, we can review. So we just took powers of powers by distributing and multiplying the exponent outside the parentheses. So if we have this right here, 5 to the power 3 to the power 2, that's not 5 to the power 5. Instead, that's 5 to the power 3 multiplied by itself 2 times. And we know from our studies in the past that that means that we can simply add the exponents together to get 5 to the power 6, or we can multiply 3 to the power 3 times 2 in the beginning to get 6 as well, and that whole thing is equal to 15,625. Lastly, if we have 2 terms, that's okay. We can still distribute the exponent. So we have that 2, and we're going to distribute it because we know that that whole thing is equal to 3 times 2 to the power 3 times another 3 times 2 to the power 3. That whole thing becomes 3 to the power 2 times 2 to the power 6. Or we can multiply 2 times the 1 on top of the 3 and a 2 times the 3 on top of the 2. That gives us a total of 576. Cool. I hope you're as proud of your progress as I am of you and the progress you've made. Until then, see you next time. 나랑 도망쳐볼까 두 번 다시 생각하지만 너를 감싸줄게 like a universe